The momentum around Africa-Caribbean integration is accelerating, driven by renewed political commitment, new financial instruments, and expanding institutional partnerships. Leaders from both regions are calling for deeper alignment between the African Union and CARICOM states to transform long-standing historical ties into structured economic cooperation. This edition of the Africa 24 Caribbean Journal explores calls for greater alignment between the African Union and CARICOM, Afreximbank's $5 billion CARICOM financing initiative, a profile of Daniel Bess, President of the Caribbean Development Bank, an interview with John Osborne, Minister of Agriculture for Montserrat, breakthroughs in digital payment systems through PAPSS, and a country focus on Jamaica. Calls for deeper Africa-Caribbean cooperation are intensifying, with leaders advocating stronger alignment between the African Union and Caribbean community. Despite long-standing historical ties, trade between the two regions remains limited, accounting for less than 3% of Africa's total export, highlighting the urgency to build a more structured and strategic partnership. The push to align frameworks between the African Union and the Caribbean community is gaining momentum as both regions seek to transform political relations into tangible economic outcomes. Trade between Africa and the Caribbean remains limited, accounting for less than 3% of Africa's total exports. Harmonizing policies on trade, investment, and governance is seen as a critical step towards unlocking new opportunities for businesses and investors across the Atlantic. This effort is reinforced by the scale of existing integration frameworks. The African Continental Free Trade Area brings together 54 countries, 1.3 billion people, and a combined GDP of around $3 trillion, offering a significant platform for expanded cooperation, while CARICOM provides a coordinated regional structure to facilitate engagement.
Because there must be the political will, and the political environment must be created. Between the African Union and CARICOM, or the Caribbean community, we come together, we discuss. We can then say and signal that politically we endorse fully the connection between Africa as a continent and the Caribbean community, CARICOM, or those of us who live in the Caribbean region. Once that is established at the political level, then I'm sure that entrepreneurs, business people, just ordinary people, will then create the real tangible ways of how we can see the benefit of that political will.
Beyond political commitment, institutions are expected to play a central role in translating this vision into concrete initiatives, particularly in key sectors such as agriculture, renewable energy, and digital trade. However, structural challenges remain, including financing constraints and limited connectivity. The African Development Bank estimates that Africa faces a trade finance gap exceeding $100 billion annually, limiting its capacity to scale partnerships globally.
We have a responsibility to work together on this planet that we live in. And so regional organizations have, first of all, a responsibility within their regions to ensure that they maintain the development progress of their region, but importantly too that they trade, they exchange, they collaborate, they work peacefully with their neighbors. And if that happens, the world would be a better place.
As both regions move towards stronger institutional alignment, Dr. Terence Drew, Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, and CARICOM chairperson emphasized that sustained political will supported by effective financial and regulatory frameworks will be essential to unlocking the full potential of Africa-Caribbean cooperation and building a competitive transatlantic economic partnership.
So I think the African Union and CARICOM, we have a responsibility to declare politically that this is what we would support. And then government institutions can help to facilitate and support the initiatives that would be sort of, or the initiatives that can go forward to help to push what we are seeking to do.
As the African Union and CARICOM strengthen their partnership, the focus is now shifting from political dialogue to concrete economic action. With stronger institutions, better financing, and sustained political will, both regions aim to unlock new opportunities in trade, investment, and innovation, paving the way for a more dynamic and competitive Africa-Caribbean partnership. Afreximbank is reshaping Africa's Caribbean relations through a $5 billion CARICOM financing initiative aimed at boosting trade, infrastructure, and private sector growth. The program seeks to strengthen economic resilience, reduce external dependency, and turn historic ties into practical financial cooperation, helping Caribbean economies integrate multiply into African trade networks.
For a long time, trade between Africa and the Caribbean has remained limited, amounting to less than $1 billion annually, despite a shared history and deep cultural ties. With this new financing package of more than $5 billion, Afreximbank aims to change the situation. Infrastructure, energy, tourism, agriculture, and creative industries are now at the center of priorities. The objective is clear: to create genuine transatlantic value chains and reduce dependence on traditional markets.
We will, therefore, increase the global limit to this region from the current $3 billion to $5 billion with the hope of achieving full utilization over the next 3 to 4 years.
Beyond financing, this initiative is part of a broader strategy. Afreximbank, whose assets exceed $40 billion, is multiplying support instruments for trade and investment. The bank is also supporting the establishment of logistics corridors, cross-border payment systems, and commercial platforms between the two regions. This approach aims to reduce the structural barriers that still hinder Africa-Caribbean trade.
We will overcome the challenge. Once there's goodwill and the need to see that it actually provides benefits to our people, then we will overcome those challenges.
Behind this initiative lies an ambition to build a global Africa connected to its diaspora. The Afro-Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum, launched in 2022, has become a central framework for dialogue between governments, financial institutions, and the private sector. Ultimately, the objective is to lay the foundation for an Africa-Caribbean free trade agreement with strengthened circulation of capital, goods, and skills.
As means for us to provide a better standard of living for our people, as I say, to enhance security for our people, to give hope to the people in individual countries and in the region. And we believe fundamentally.
With this $5 billion financing package, Afreximbank is no longer simply financing African trade, it is reshaping economic balances between continents, a strategy that positions the Africa-Caribbean axis as one of the new emerging hubs of South-South cooperation.
Daniel Best, president of the Caribbean Development Bank, represents a new generation of Caribbean financial leadership focused on development finance, regional integration, and sustainable economic transformation. Under his leadership, the Caribbean Development Bank is strengthening its role in mobilizing investment, supporting climate resilience, and advancing inclusive growth across member states, while deepening partnerships with Africa and other global regions to expand trade and development cooperation. Since 2025, Daniel Best has been leading the Caribbean Development Bank with a focus on giving new momentum to the regional institution. A civil engineer and development finance specialist, the Barbadian has nearly 30 years of experience in infrastructure and project management. Before his appointment, he headed the bank's project department, overseeing programs in education, resilient infrastructure, and social inclusion, benefiting around 1.6 million people across the Caribbean. He also contributed to the establishment of the institution's first sustainable finance framework.
The theme, Bridging the Gap, Mobilizing Private Capital to Unlock Africa's Full Potential, speaks directly to a challenge and a unique opportunity that defines both our regions and increasingly shapes our shared future.
Facing economic and climate challenges, Daniel Best advocates a vision based on three priorities: innovating, transforming, and making Caribbean economies thrive. His ambition is to strengthen food security, support the energy transition, and accelerate financing for the region's most vulnerable states. Under his leadership, the Caribbean Development Bank also plans to launch new financial products to support the private sector and strengthen the resilience of island economies.
Dominica's pioneering geothermal project stands as one such example. This project, positioned to deliver clean, reliable, and affordable baseload energy, began as a concept that many commercial players viewed as too risky. Yet through strong public leadership, carefully structured risk allocation, concessional finance, and private sector operational expertise, it is now charting the way forward for renewable energy transformation in vulnerable small islands.
Daniel Best also emphasizes the key role of development finance institutions in transforming economies. According to him, these institutions do not merely finance projects, they help structure ecosystems capable of sustainably attracting private capital and reducing the structural vulnerabilities of countries.
When we help a government prepare a pipeline, structure a concession, or design a blended finance mechanism, we are not simply facilitating a single project. We are improving the environment for all future investments. This is how ecosystems take shape.
Through a career blending engineering, finance, and public policy strategy, Daniel Best embodies a new approach to development in the Caribbean, one that is more inclusive, more sustainable, and driven by innovation. In a region particularly exposed to climate and economic crisis, the new president of the Caribbean Development Bank now aims to turn Caribbean challenges into opportunities for sustainable growth.
John Osborne, Minister of Agriculture of Montserrat, highlighted the strategic importance of agricultural transformation in strengthening food security, reducing import dependence, and building climate-resilient food systems. He emphasizes that deeper Africa-Caribbean cooperation in agriculture, technology transfer, and investment is essential to boost productivity, enhance rural livelihoods, and support sustainable economic development across both regions.
How can we explain the Caribbean's heavy dependence on food imports, and why is the shift from food security to food sovereignty a strategic issue?
I think first what we need to do is look at the data. The Caribbean on a whole, if you look at the importation, we import maybe about $6 billion worth of food. That's importation bill in the Caribbean. In Montserrat, for instance, 90% of what we eat is actually imported. Now, I'm a new minister. I've only been a minister for a year. So I set out to actually look at why do we have these bottlenecks within the Caribbean. And we've now more focused on a term called food sovereignty than food security. The reason for that is food security is easy to attain. If we buy enough food for our people, we can get food security. Food sovereignty, on the other hand, determines who controls the value chain, who's producing. And the reason why that is important, especially in a state like Montserrat, is that if you're importing everything, it means that you have zero control of the external pricing of food. So when we look at what the cost of living is on island, you have zero control over that because you're importing so much. Versus if you try to attain food sovereignty and you're actually producing locally, then you have more control over the pricing and what your people eat. So even from a health standpoint, you get to control that narrative a little bit better.
How can Africa's agricultural potential, combined with its historical and cultural ties, serve as a catalyst for achieving food sovereignty?
When I looked at the statistics of Africa, I realized that in terms of all the arable farming lands that's left not cultivated, Africa accounts for over 60% of that. So because we're African by descent, and I'll just say 88% of Montserrat, when we did a DNA analysis, were of African origin, African descendants, which means that we are Africa. We are part of the African diaspora. So if we want to attain food sovereignty, we need to look to places like Africa, which our people came from, which our knowledge came from, which a lot of the things that we planted came from, to achieve that food sovereignty.
What practical measures need to be taken to boost trade with Africa?
Well, I was actually pleased that the Afreximbank is actually putting money into the Caribbean. So they've extended and increased their capital to 5 million. So the financing is there. What I think we need now are the trade routes. And yes, I know there were some presentations that said that trade between Africa and the Caribbean does happen. But again, with the type of food that we want to import, we need to shorten those routes. We need to not go through Europe or to the US and then back to the Caribbean. Very much like our trip here, we left from St. Kitts and we came on a direct flight from St. Kitts to Africa. We need to increase those trade routes so that there are direct boats, direct ships leaving from Africa to the Caribbean and facilitate that. So I think once we can facilitate that level of trade, it'll be a lot better for both regions.
Following the launch of discussions and commitments at the 2026 Afro-Caribbean Summit, what do you think are the challenges in moving from words to actions?
So the conversation has started. What I would like to see now is the action. In the Caribbean, and sometimes we try to achieve perfection before we implement. I think sometimes that's what holds us back from actually getting to where we need to get.
Unlocking trade between Africa and the Caribbean is increasingly tied to financial integration and efficient payment systems. New solutions driven by the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System (PAPSS) are set to enable cross-border payments in under 120 seconds, a major shift from traditional systems that often take several days. This breakthrough comes as trade between the two regions remain below 3% of total exports, reflecting persistent structural and financial barriers.
Unlocking trade between Africa and the Caribbean is increasingly driven by financial integration and more efficient payment systems. The Pan-African Payment and Settlement System (PAPSS) is set to enable cross-border transactions in under 120 seconds, a significant improvement from traditional systems that can take several days. This development comes as trade between the two regions remain below 3% of total export, highlighting persistent structural constraints. The momentum is growing following the 2023 endorsement of PAPSS by the Central Bank Governors of the Caribbean Community, paving the way for a regional Caribbean payment system to be integrated with PAPSS, allowing businesses to transact instantly and in local currencies.
They have permitted PAPSS to help to set up a CARICOM payment and settlement system, which will be a payment system that brings together all of these islands together, and they are able to actually make instant payments among themselves. That pilot is about to commence this year, and then subsequently what we intend to do is to integrate PAPSS and CAPS together, so that a transaction that starts in somewhere on the African continent can arrive, say, in Barbados in under 120 seconds, and that will certainly make trades easier. I say this recognizing that what you call trade actually does not happen without payments.
Current cross-border transactions between Africa and global markets typically take 3 to 5 days and rely on correspondent banks outside the continent. By contrast, PAPSS processes payment within the system, reducing transaction costs by over 90% and significantly improving efficiency. Faster payments are expected to directly support trade flows, which remain constrained between Africa and the Caribbean. The platform also addresses foreign exchange challenges by enabling settlement in local currencies and reducing reliance on external currencies, a key constraint for many businesses, particularly SMEs.
So we have seen that countries that have adopted PAPSS has actually reduced their dependence on third-party foreign currencies by as much as 80%.
While payment innovation is a key step in unlocking Africa-Caribbean trade, which remains below 3% of total exports, economists stress that deeper integration will also require coordinated policies, improved logistics, and greater mobility of people and goods. As these conditions improve, seamless payment systems are expected to play a central role in facilitating trade and strengthening economic ties between the two regions. The Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, Terence M. Drew, has announced that his country will host the 2026 African Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum Active. The announcement was made in Abuja, Nigeria, during the 32nd annual meetings of the African Export-Import Bank. Designed to strengthen trade relations between Africa and the Caribbean, the forum brings together investors, policymakers, and business leaders to discuss issues related to trade, investment, and economic cooperation. The head of government praised Afreximbank's role in fostering closer ties between the two regions. Reggae Sumfest 2026, billed as the greatest reggae show on earth, will take place from 12 to 18 July 2026 in Montego Bay, Jamaica. The event will showcase reggae and dancehall music through a series of concerts, theme parties, and cultural activities. The program includes a family fun day on 13 July, a street dance on 14 July, and several festive nights leading up to the main concert held at the Catering Hall complex. Each year, the festival attracts thousands of visitors from across the Caribbean and beyond. ASHA will organize the International Conference on Agricultural Land Management and Ecosystem Health ICALMEH 26 on 10th and 11th August 2026 in Bridgetown, Barbados. The event will bring together researchers, academics, and experts to discuss issues related to sustainable agriculture and ecosystem conservation. Discussions will focus in particular on the sharing of experiences, scientific innovation, and new research approaches in the environmental field.
Jamaica is a Caribbean island nation with a population of about 2.8 million people and a GDP of approximately $19 to $20 billion, driven mainly by tourism, services, remittances, and the creative economy. Services accounts for over 70% of GDP, reflecting its diversified economic structure despite its small size. Beyond its economic profile, Jamaica plays a growing strategic role in regional integration, particularly following its ascension to the African Export-Import Bank framework, positioning it as a key bridge in strengthening Africa-Caribbean trade and investment cooperation.
Long known primarily for its tourism industry and global cultural influence, Jamaica is now emerging as a strategic player in the economic rapprochement between Africa and the Caribbean, with a population of around 2.8 million and a gross domestic product estimated at between 19 to 23 billion US dollar. The English-speaking island now boasts one of the most diversified economies in the Caribbean region, driven by services sector, which accounts for more than 70% of GDP. Jamaica's growth is fueled by tourism, financial services, telecommunications, remittances from its diaspora, as well as its global influential creative industry. Its recent ascension to the African Export-Import Banks makes a new stage in its geo-economic positioning.
Jamaica is the largest English-speaking country in the Caribbean. It is situated just to the south of Cuba, which is the largest island in the Caribbean. Jamaica is 4,411 square miles. Jamaica is famous for a number of things. It is famous for its culture. It is most known for its music. And it has produced many of the world's most outstanding musicians, like Bob Marley, the late Bob Marley. Jamaica is also famous for its sports. Jamaica has produced the fastest athletes.
Jamaica possesses significant economic assets. Tourism, particularly in the regions of Montego Bay, Negril, and Oko Rios, remains the main driver of growth, accounting for between 22 and 30% of total GDP. And generating more than 60% of the country's total foreign exchange export earnings. This is complemented by remittances from the diaspora, especially from the United States, Canada, and the United Kingdom. The country also maintains a strategic mining sector while expanding logistics, digital industries, and port activities. Its central geographical position is intended to make it a regional platform for trade and maritime transshipment.
Jamaica is also famous for its Blue Mountain coffee. It's also famous for its bauxite production, and it's also famous for its businesses. The Sandals Hotel chain is from Jamaica.
Jamaica's accession to Afreximbank in July 2025 strengthened its cooperation momentum, positioning the country as a key Caribbean partner. This integration gives Kingston broader access to financing and guarantees aimed at boosting trade with Africa. The country plans to mobilize these resources for infrastructure, small and medium-sized enterprises, culture, agriculture, and logistics. For the government, this alliance represents a strategic lever for economic diversification in the face of global tensions and climate vulnerability.
So Jamaica is, for many people, Jamaica would be considered to be the most famous country in the Caribbean. In fact, when I say to people that I come from the Caribbean, the first country they mention to me is Jamaica. So it's a very famous, a very outstanding country. In politics, they're also well known. So it's a very progressive country, a country that has contributed much to the world and to the world development.
Beyond its national interest, Jamaica now appears to be one of the pillars of the new Africa-Caribbean partnership, driven by Afreximbank and CARICOM member states. Thanks to its cultural influence, relative political stability, and regional connectivity, the country aims to become a bridge between Africa, Caribbean, and North American markets. Kingston could therefore play a central role in the development of cross-investment, South-South trade, and Afro-Caribbean creative industries within the framework of a rapidly expanding transatlantic economic cooperation.
Africa 24 Caribbean Journal is the first 360-degree magazine, TV, digital, and print, dedicated to highlighting the partnerships, investment, and strategies shaping relations between Africa and the Caribbean. Find this edition on Africa 24, Africa 24 English, the My Africa 24 app, Africa's first HD streaming platform, www.africa24tv.com, and on all our social media channels.